I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call?
Trustee Blower?
Yes.
Trustee Fisher?
Yes.
Trustee Patterson? Present.
And the first item on the agenda is public participation.
That's one.
And we have Kimberly Vogel.
Yeah, hold on. I reorganized.
Good evening. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry.
My name is Kimberly Vogel, and I'm the president of Ross, and use the power granted to them by the residents of Ross. Respectfully. Now, I don't want to be misunderstood. I am not here to fight to keep debris from our remodel on our property that we always had intentions of removing before we got our very threatening and aggressive letter. It was brought to my attention after filing for the record complaint that it was board member Jennifer Patterson that had complained against us. The nuisance policy specifically states that anonymous complaints will not be accepted. This is relevant because when I talked to Jennifer about the issue, she directly stated that she filed on behalf of one of my neighbors so that they could remain anonymous. This is not technically against the rules, but it is morally dishonest and an abuse of power. My job here today is to make the residents aware of the shady policy that allows board members to control the residents, to do so as they say, when they say, without protection of the residents. And it is a prime example of government overreach.
Thank you. Executive session. Move for the adoption of motion 23-050 to retire to executive session to discuss the appointment, employment, or compensation of a public employee in accordance with Ohio Revised Code, section 121.22 G1. The time is 6:03. I need a second.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Trustee Fisher?
Yes.
Trustee Patterson?
Yes.
Trustee Blower?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Move to the adoption of motion 23-051 to return from executive session to the regular meeting. I have 7:02. I need a second.
Second.
Discussion? No. Roll call, please.
Trustee Fisher?
Yes.
Trustee Patterson?
Yes.
Trustee Blower?
Yes. Administrator updates.
The only thing that I have this evening is just to note that this agenda for a work session is a work in progress. I just came up with this. Any suggestions you have for modification as we continue to have these work sessions, please make me aware of. In regards to the long-term topics, all of them don't necessarily need to be discussed. I will just be including things on there that need to stay on your radar. So you can decide if you want to discuss them or not. And that's really the only update that I have.
All right, thank you. Anything for the administrator?
You guys have any feedback on the agenda format while we've got Lori here, or anything that we want to talk about?
Oh, no, I like it.
Agree. I think there's plenty of topics.
Quite a few to work on.
Yeah.
Yes.
We have, yes. Okay, I'm good with it. The call to order, I like the public participation being in the beginning, and it might even be helpful on a regular trustee meeting if we, kind of had that. It's always seemed weird to me in the middle. I think executive session, if it's relevant to things we need on the discussion items, I think makes sense, but I'd be equally fine if executive sessions were at the end.
I just had this one at the beginning since it included a department head that he didn't have to stay for the entire meeting.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So if we've got somebody who needs to go in and out, I'm great with that, but
Agree.
generally speaking, I'm good with it. And there normally would not be legislation.
Normally, no.
It's just that we had talked at the last meeting about having legislation at this meeting, as we all have grace for catching up.
Thank you.
You legitimately couldn't get it. Yeah, no, it's all good. Your stuff could always come
Okay.
because you have time sensitive stuff.
Well, yeah. Sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes I'm like, oh, well, we really have to have that done. And we're not going to have another meeting. So yeah,
That's all good.
that's good.
All right, fiscal officer updates.
Well, on that very topic, thank you for the grace and allowing legislative action tonight. Later for your consideration will be a resolution adopting the 2023 permanent appropriations. Initially, I didn't think it was going to be a problem, and then I realized our next meeting is until April 6th, and these have to be adopted by March 31st because there's actually a function in UAN where temporary appropriations turn off on March 31st. And if you don't have your permanent appropriations in, you need papal dispensation from UAN and the auditor of state to get into UAN and actually put in permanent appropriations. So it's a really big no-no. So I kind of realized it was a little late. And in all honesty, I did not get the information back from the auditor that I needed by the last meeting. So I really was on them. So again, later for your consideration will be the adoption of the permanent appropriations. So
Good deal.
that's all I have.
Thank you. Anything further for the fiscal officer this evening?
No, thank you.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to our discussion items. We'll start off with short-term topics. And we have 6 of them this evening. We may speak about some in length and others just a few words and then move on to the next one as we may just kind of get an idea of maybe what we want to talk about at the next meeting. But the first one is our regular meeting agenda format. Let me just kind of talk about that a second ago.
Well, we talked about the work session.
Work session.
Yeah.
Okay, what about our regular meeting agenda format? What do you got there?
Do you all like it?
Yes, it's fine with me. No change there.
I think,
Unless you want to move that public participation part.
well, yeah, let me ask a question. It seems different than how I'm used to doing public meetings. So not to say it's right or wrong, I'm just used to, we have some legislation, there's an introduction by the administrator, and then we move into the legislation and have the conversation. It feels to me like when we do this in a regular meeting, we talk about what we're going to talk about and then we talk about it. And
Okay.
maybe there's a reason for that. Like maybe there's, and I'm kind of looking to you for the history or you for other, with zoning and things like that. Like, does it feel like that to anyone else that we could streamline that?
I'm definitely open to streamline it, as I've been playing around watching Morgan Township on their live feed. And then I'll read the minutes from the Oxford Township, and everyone is different than what we do, than the way we present our meeting. And Morgan Township is definitely different than our format. So, yeah.
What do they do?
It's.
I know it's hard off the spot, but like,
They don't, I don't really see them read where they read, let me get my old one. The procedural actions where they talk about dispense with the reading of the minutes. And I may be missing that because I think one of their Monday meetings that's at 10 o'clock, it lasted over 3 hours. So I kind of gave up. But they don't motion it, and the fiscal officer has a different way she talks about her resolutions.
do they do a consent agenda?
I don't know. I've not really looked at Morgan.
And I've only watched 2 of them, but it is definitely different. Not saying that.
No, and I'm open, and like I said,
Better
I
than ours.
used to attend a lot of different types of meetings for my previous jobs. And you're right, it's a mixed bag of how things are done. But like, we're very similar to the way Fairfield Township operates.
Okay.
But I don't know that that's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing.
I don't either.
But you're right, there's a lot of times a consent agenda and you don't go through each individual, you just approve the consent agenda. But that is not also providing information to your,
Right.
there's a trade-off there.
Yeah. So like counties will do consent agendas because it's, 45 things where they've asked to travel to a conference or something, and they just do it as one motion. But that gets into having the agenda available for the public before the meeting starts, which is another thing that's just different for me. Like where I normally am, our agendas are available the Thursday before. You can look at that and decide, oh, I want to go to that meeting. I don't want to go to that meeting. No, like there are some functional challenges to that to some extent, and certainly getting department heads used to that. I've begged a couple times to get on a council agenda because I missed the deadline and was politely told no. And sometimes I'm told yes. It just depends on, the clerk and how much time she has, but I'm the one that missed the deadline. So we have the minutes for people, right? The previous minutes. Sorry, I didn't mean to ask as you were drinking.
Yeah, that's fine. The minutes that were approved minutes,
Okay.
yes.
So just as we think about where public participation fits and how to streamline, and I'm kind of open to a discussion too on if it's feasible to get agendas out a little bit ahead of time so that people could walk in and pick one up, or they could look on it, ahead of time and decide if it's worth there's a topic they want to talk about. But Keith, do you know what other townships do for that?
I do not. Like I said, I only viewed the one, and I read when they post the minutes for Oxford Township. I can surely search the internet and check out a few if we want to talk about this in the future, or just make the adjustments that you think would be necessary. But you just brought up like before the business meeting on April 6th, that the agenda would be set prior to the Tuesday?
So so when I'm at the city, our meetings are Tuesday nights.
Okay.
And our agendas go out Thursdays before. And we do it like it's a whole packet,
And it's posted on your website, what will be on the agenda? Is that doable? I mean, not immediately for the April meeting, but.
I think for us and the way things come up and for the short term, it would be to have a smaller window. So like if our meetings are Thursday, they have to have agenda items in, and the agenda gets set and maybe published the morning of or the day before.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because, and then you have to, again, grace is a great word. There are going to be things that are an emergency. Oh, by the way, just found out this grant is due next week and we have to have it done. So as long as we're flexible and have a little bit of fluidity.
Yeah.
But it is nice for people to be able to, I mean, if they could print it out at home or look at it and go, oh, I'm not,
We were just talking about that when you were in your meeting.
Yeah.
That's good.
be nice to have it in advance, or at least the morning of, oh, do I want to go tonight or not?
So do we, oh, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, I would say if we could move forward and as long as it's posted beforehand,
Okay.
give it a try.
And we would just ask that it be out beforehand.
Yes.
You know, ideally that day before, but as we learn and work, and leave it to Lori and Julie for how that works on the back end with department heads and because their whole timing now will be really different with a work session and trying to get agendas out ahead of time.
Yeah.
Now, the public agenda would be a lot more like bullet point. It doesn't have to be
A
as,
separate agenda?
or just, I don't know, we can chat about that because a lot of times the agenda that you're provided has a lot of detail in it. And I don't know, maybe it is the agenda that goes out to the public. I don't know. If there's a way to bullet point it, but that, we don't want to create a whole second separate agenda for Lori to do.
Like ours says, you've got like legislation and then it says earlier in the meeting, the administrator ours is almost more descriptive than what you would probably have to have, but you could have on there resolution number 2023-X doing this. And then people would know, okay, we're going, this resolution, they could follow along and they would know what the resolutions were about, which we wouldn't have to put unless it's just easier to hand the whole thing over.
Yeah, I don't know. We could,
Whatever you want.
trial and error.
Right.
Yeah, and get feedback because like we've changed how we do council packets and I think they're hard to read, but it's a lot more information, but it's hard to read. And we may find that after we hand out a couple formats, people are like, I liked this one or gosh, that doesn't help me as much as I thought. Trial and error.
So, do you want public participation for the regular meetings moved to the beginning? Similar this evening or keep it in the same place?
Moving it.
I have no preference on that.
If you want to move it, let's move it.
I think you can move it if you give agendas ahead of time and let people know. I have a feeling it's in the middle because you had to know what the meeting was going to be about for the most part to know if you had something to speak on. It's just a guess. So if it's out ahead of time.
Okay. And the next question would be, since during the regular meetings, you will discuss items you would like included on the work session agenda, do you want that towards the end of the meeting?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
We good with the regular meeting agenda format? Okay, let's move on to the spring newsletter content. I did notice in this month's Cornerstone that their front page article was on the land use plan, old and new, present. Not everybody picks that newsletter up. I enjoy it. But maybe a lot of people don't pick it up. So I think that would be for at the administrative part of that. I think that would be something we should put on there since it's going to every resident in Ross Township. And they'd have an opportunity to read the article and what it's all about and what we're doing with it.
Okay.
Great idea.
And that's all I can think about putting in our part of the newsletter for the quarter.
Okay.
I'm happy to help write something up for the committees. I think we need to talk about them, but that might be, if you have space.
Oh, on our next one? Okay.
I think that's one of the most critical pieces.
Yeah, to get that word out, because we did tell people, when we filled with Trustee Fisher, like, we're looking at committees. This is something we see launching this spring. I think we need to land that plane and get that out there for people.
Fiscal oversight, safety, public services.
We kind of felt like those were two big chunks that could be, well, that those committees could mature as time goes on, but probably the two most pressing things.
Agree.
What is the sound one, sound all weather sirens?
Trustee Fisher and I attended the Township Association meeting, and one of the big topics of conversation was the tornado that went through Wayne and Madison. And Matt Franke from the sheriff's office explained they had a lot of calls to 911. People at this end of the county were like, why are these sirens keep going off?
Because it's
Just understanding how the signals, the sirens, just an interesting one-off is, they were saying how in this particular situation, a public, I think it was a law enforcement agent actually saw the funnel cloud and called it in to the emergency system, and they were able to sound the alarm that it was coming. It was well in advance of the National Weather Service. So they were on, they're always obviously looking at radar. And there was a situation in Madison where a young teenage boy was on the second floor of his home and got the alert because he was in the immediate area, and you get an alert on your phone, and he swiped it because why do you need to pay attention to that? And he watched his roof get blown off the house. Apparently it was very, very tragic and very scary for the young man. But there just is a lack of information about, especially with some of our younger folks. So if you're in the immediate area and you get an alert, but you're not going to get that alert every 15 minutes, it's one and done. So there's just some things about the signal. And I suggested to Administrator Kyle that perhaps maybe that would be a good topic for our residents to understand how the signals work, how the alerts work.
When it's appropriate to call 911.
Correct.
And when it's not, because the
Yeah.
system got overloaded because everyone was calling 911 because
Complaining about the length.
the sirens going off, but the alert was off their phones. So I think just some education on.
And if you're not in the immediate area, you're probably not going to get the alert. So people just need to kind of understand it. I think back, years ago, we would get alerts when there was just bad weather coming. Well, they don't do that anymore. People got desensitized to the sirens. And now when you hear them, and with the speed in which these storms can move through, it might be 2 or 3 minutes. So
Great topic.
thought it might just be helpful for our residents.
Didn't we join a program last year with the rest of the county? When that it's going to address our cell phones? When is that coming on board? Do we know?
That's what number 6
Number
is,
6.
And I spoke with
Jump into that.
Tanya today. Apparently, EMA, we were holding off on learning how to use this system because they were in fact going to be utilizing a new system, which was put into place, and EMA employees were trained on it, only to be notified by the new system that the new system was taking over another company and would be migrating the new system to another new system. So she anticipates it will be the end of April before they are ready to train the township on how to use that system. And at that point, which will probably have to be the fall newsletter, we would inform residents how they can enroll with that system.
It's a system that
There's our update.
allows you to push out, hey, this is whether it's a chemical spill or weather or evacuations, whatever. So kind of came out of some situations where the conversation was, how do we communicate with our residents? And, the timeliness of social media, but we're not necessarily built for that right now. So what could you do that people could opt in? So you weren't imposing yourself on someone, but if you had someone that lived in that house right there and might be older, and you, most relevant family member in an emergency, live an hour and a half away, you could set it up that it would go to your phone. So to check on mom or check on dad or start heading this way.
Right.
So it had the benefit of opting in. It also had the benefit of a wider net. And apparently it's being upgraded 3 times.
Yes. But it's going to be fabulous.
Lori, do you feel like that is a good amount to fill the newsletter? I have a tough time seeing that and thinking of the newsletter. I mean, do you feel like you have,
Very much so. The content from Steve was rather lengthy about outdoor burning. So yes. And I have reached out to Matt Franke in regards to the Sound One, Sound All. I have not heard back from him. Hopefully he will provide something. And the community aggregation pieces. Yes.
Content.
Okay, the CDBG Community Needs Survey response.
you want to do that one and then go back to advisory committees? Or I'm good with whichever. You want to start CDBG because that's probably not very long.
Oh, we skipped, okay, we were talking about newsletter. I did skip advisory committee. I wrote a note by it and I thought we were already done. No, let's stay with the agenda and stick with the advisory committees. Did put a note next to it, newsletter. Were we going to have some space for that in the newsletter? And what were the possible committees?
Financial oversight and safety public service.
I think the idea was that we would do kind of an all-call public posting, same thing, send us a letter of why you'd like to be on this or what skills you have, what's your background. I don't think, Keith, did we, and Julie's got a big part of this too with the financial oversight. Did we talk about how many people make an ideal committee?
Not that I recall.
Do you have thoughts on?
Not really. I've never really been involved with the financial oversight. I'll just be leading, I guess. I've never participated in one. So we could just see what the interest is. I've spoken to one resident who is very interested, who attends our meetings with fair regularity, but just told him that there would probably be an opportunity for him to submit some sort of interest resume, something, application, or just, I'm interested type thing. So, well, I guess we'll see. I don't know, 5?
So I think you could do 3, and then if the committee decided they wanted 2 more, or you could go 5 if we felt, I'm worried that 5 is a lot to ask of people on 2. I mean, that's finding 10 people.
Right.
Which is hard, especially as we're learning what those committees could be useful for.
And I think the smaller the committee, the topics stay a little bit more focused. Then the more people, the wider it gets. And I think in the beginning, it would be good just to keep things as tight as we can.
Well, and I do
topic-wise.
potentially see that, with financial oversight, some of it is going to bleed into public service, public safety, because levies are going to come up within both of those 2 topics. And they're not, I think they're going to have to be talked about in tandem at times.
So that if you had 3 on each committee, then you're 6 people having a joint discussion and breaking down those silos and all that good stuff. So that's a pretty hefty group to start.
Yeah, I think it's 3 to 5.
Okay. So we could always I'll write something up for Lori or with Lori for the newsletter, and then you guys will see it because Lori sends out the draft of the newsletter. And we could always think on that and decide, oh, that doesn't seem right, or let's try something different. So we can have a look at it before it goes out.
Okay.
Keith, are you good with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, we'll move on to the CDBG Community Needs Survey. And I just had their date. Please assist us by completing and returning the survey by the 24th. We're already 16. They want it back by next Friday. did we want to do this just individually and turn it in and send, have Lori send it over all three of our packets? Or do we want to speak about this at length this evening and choose as we go along?
You have to justify it in a plan. So like that second page with the methodology.
Yes.
I think that if I remember right, the last time we talked, we have a land use plan. But we don't have a special needs study, a housing study, an economic development plan, a community survey. The last community survey has to be sanctioned at this point, right?
Yes.
So I think prioritize the top 3 categories, most important from the drop-down list. Then select the projects underneath each category. So I think we could probably have a conversation about the top 3: community facilities, infrastructure, special needs services, housing, business and jobs, neighborhood services, and community services. We have to pick our top up to 3. And then once we do that, we can fill in the bubbles underneath. I don't know that our land use plan, I mean, it doesn't even address special needs services. I mean, domestic violence, substance abuse, homeless shelters, that's not part of it. I have a feeling if we start walking through these, we're not going to have a ton of options. We could probably just do it right now.
Yes, we don't have the facilities for most of the stuff. We don't have any vacant buildings to even start any type of program.
Yeah, like senior centers, youth centers, childcare, that's not part of the land use plan. We didn't get into that, so that category is off the table. Same thing with community services. So community facilities and community services is off.
Infrastructure, I know we have a drainage improvement coming up on Black Road that Paul's spoken about.
Do you remember, was there anything in the land use plan about, we talked a lot about utility delivery. I don't remember talking about anything in there that requires drainage. Not to say it's not a problem, but we have to point to the plan where it's in the plan. And I don't think.
Right, and I think the county's doing this, is going to provide a study on that drainage.
Right.
And I did go Black Road last evening, and I noticed a lot of red cones, but for some reason I'm thinking that's utilities versus.
They've been all up and down
Study.
doing.
Okay.
Yeah. I saw that too and thought, it's a
I thought
it's
they
a
were
lovely
wrong.
line.
I was going to call Paul today and ask him about it, and I realized it was other.
You put, okay, so the land use plan, while we're under infrastructure, there was a talk about street alley improvements, street lighting and sidewalk improvements. That I think falls within the Venice overlay district. So I think you could justify that there is a plan out there that shows those. I don't think there's anything under housing in there.
In the years past, the sidewalk improvements have grant money. The most recent of sidewalk out in front of the building here up to School Road. Quite a few years before that was School Road. Another fiscal year behind that was going down Lehigh to the intersection. And then didn't Watson do a trade with the county to get the sidewalk from Venice Crossing and let him release up his bond or something?
He did that.
Yeah, I remember
Historic preservation.
instead of them giving us the money and they giving it right back, that he rotated that as a bond out and they put in the sidewalks.
Specific to me.
I don't know. I know we've spoken in the years past about advancing the sidewalk from IGA court up to the school, but it's still left out safe passage over the bridge, even though they still walk in the grass, walk in the emergency lane back into the grass.
Yep.
So I don't think this would build a bridge.
No, and I don't think this is, how are they using this? I think it's just for them to start to think about their programs, right? This is just tell us what you guys need and make it defensible. And then we're gonna take our $2 million in HUD money and come up with some programs. But if, I would liken it to maybe, and I don't want to speak for the county, but if everybody says infrastructure is number one, you're going to get a more robust sidewalk program out of that, right? But
Right.
if everybody's saying no, job creation, retention, and employment training, we're going to take $2 million and put it into workforce across the county.
I just see the focus on infrastructure. I mean, between the drainage and the street lighting and sidewalk improvements, street improvements. And again, we have the methodology of the land use that we can use for that.
That's some of the hardest stuff for us to fund because there's no levy behind it. Our streets and infrastructure is hard to fund.
Right.
I mean, it's hard. Would you guys be okay if we just went with, we have one priority and it's everything under infrastructure except water and sewer because we don't control those? Not that they're not important, but I don't know that we could claim.
I've circled everyone but water and sewer under
Okay.
infrastructure.
Is there anything else you guys think we could justify?
Under community facilities, they've got fire and equipment.
But I don't think we have a publicly adopted plan that,
No, I just know that there's a program that they keep rotating the turnout gear due to its life expectancy.
yeah.
And that way we don't have to buy a whole fire department worth of turnout gear at one time. It does so many sets a year.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I put that one down. Because again, I don't think they're going to buy $1 million truck.
Lori, does that get you what you?
Yes.
Good.
Okay.
And then I would maybe under projects and comments, I think it's a little awkward, like what exactly was in there, but we plugged in like this came off the comp plan. So for us, it would be the land use plan and the Venice overlay. There's no real direction, so I'm not sure that was what was right there. That's just what we put in there.
I did ask if projects needed to be vetted, and she said
But no.
Okay, Verizon cell tower counter offer.
I exchanged a couple of voicemails with Bobby from Verizon, so we haven't connected yet, but we're on our way. So nothing, no new updates, but
You got a name.
A placeholder.
I've got Bobby's name and number.
Thank you for taking that
Yeah,
one on.
absolutely.
Okay. The last item under short-term topics, potential brownfield sites. This was just in an email this week, correct?
yes.
We just got. I don't know of anything right offhand.
The only one that I could come up with is the site.
Probably is. This is probably a brownfield site. Yeah.
Paul responded with the corner of Sunshine and 128 because there's a former gas station.
Oh, the old Clark gas station. And
There's no building. I don't know what they would remove any remaining tanks and.
that is properties owned by Stephenson Oil. So they would be the one to know if there's anything still on site.
You can usually look it up on Buster. So the Bureau of Underground Storage Tanks, which is part of what's liquor control under, what's the big? Oh, not Department of Administrative Services, but they're, anyway, if you just Google Buster, it comes up. But they manage the underground storage tanks for gas stations and the removal and all that. So they would probably be able to tell you, or Chief could tell you. You should know if there's still a tank in the ground. And they could usually tell you if there's known leaks, which isn't to say there's not a leak. It's just that there was one time a leak. Was this to identify them for funding or to?
The land bank just sent an
They just want to
email.
know
Are there any
what's out there? Okay.
potential or known brownfields in Ross Township.
So if we want it, there is a unused gas station program in the state of Ohio that you could use. If like, for example, the old Clark Station, if they wanted to clean that up, I mean, there are programs that can do abandoned and vacant gas stations. It's just really, it's a process. And sometimes people would just rather not go into the process because it's a process.
Right.
And you would potentially never need to know that there was anything wrong, not to say that that's right or wrong, but if you have a cash buyer and you don't have any kind of mortgage that would make you bore or test, that's all good. You just be a cash buyer and we all go on our day. So I would submit them and then maybe ask what his plans are with the list. That'd be nice. If there was something that we could clean up, that would be good.
I mean, I'm going to have to back up a little bit in my childhood. That may have been Golf versus Clark. Lynn, got any idea? Remember? No?
Clark was at the corner of,
It could have been, I knew it was orange sign when we were kids.
like,
So it's going to be Golf or Clark.
Color
Clark,
rumor.
Clark was at the Columbia Inn, down by the Columbia Inn. That was a Clark station.
76.
Oh, that goes way back.
It was a 76. Larry's was a 76.
The circle.
I'm
Now I'm going to have to stop by Marathon and ask Larry tomorrow morning.
Omega.
Well, let me
No,
ask
it's
you
not a
this.
Omega.
Do you ever remember them taking dirt out? Like, do you ever
I do not,
remember
no.
anybody coming in and,
No.
and taking out dirt? Okay. That's fine.
I don't.
I'm in from the back row.
You know what else there might be, and I can look this up, but a lot of times EPA, you can search the list of violations, and I can't remember if you can search by map would be much nicer than searching by zip code. But they could tell you if there was contamination spills, so I can look and see if there's a list of EPA violations.
So should I respond with, or just tell him that we're researching?
Does he need it in the next?
Didn't give a deadline.
I can look up EPA and Buster over the weekend.
Okay,
But if you could email Chief and ask him if he knows of any spills,
okay.
you know, over there by the exit ramps or down here. I think it's who else?
And who said this property?
I did.
Okay. May have been a good idea. Because in our back property, and I've never been able to figure out why,
This part, yeah.
there are two PVCs coming out by the fence line. I have no idea what's down
Are
there.
they monitoring wells?
I have no idea. I don't know if
This building.
I've never known anybody come here and take a test sample and return the results to us, but right against that fence line is PVC pipe coming out of the ground, and I have no idea why.
I said it to Administrator Kyle as kind of a joke, because we're always talking about, well, maybe, just because of the issues we have in this building. I said it mostly as a joke, but then the more I got to thinking about it, I'm like, could actually be.
Yeah, I mean, you think about
No,
things that would have
it's
been
able,
stopped.
like it's able to breathe.
Yeah.
Bennett.
Let's check it out. And that's not anything bad about the people that were here before. I mean,
No.
back then, you did just throw the oil out the back door. You did
The dust
just
fan.
dump it. Yeah,
Let it leach into the, yeah.
absolutely. That was just what you did. And so a lot of automotive service stations are brownfields. Or, yeah. Okay. It's the short term. I feel like the long-term topics get into a lot of stuff and might be hard to go through 5 or 6 very big long-term topics.
Agree.
Do we want to, again, because we have time to discuss these. We are looking at 2019 till 8 o'clock. Do we want to take care of one long term? We want to talk about 2 and adjourn?
Do you want to do like the I think the land use plan, we've kind of already had out there a little bit, so we
Yes, okay, so let's mark that off.
can talk through that.
Yep.
Lori, do you have anything that you think we should make sure we touch base on those other ones, or Julie, any preference of?
I provided you some rough numbers on the police levy, the current status. I did some updates on what a renewal, what a replacement would generate. Keep in mind that currently generating, that levy generates approximately 800,000. The last time it was voted. So by renewing or replacing, you get a refresh with your current valuations. And so I wanted you to have some information. Keeping in mind, we have to have a decision made and filed with Board of Elections by August. I know that sounds like it's a long way away, but there's a lot of conversations that need to happen about forecasting for the police department, 5-year forecasting, what we're currently generating, expenses, revenues, the whole 9 yards. So I did a small 2-page document for you all to just kind of see the history of our values from 19 to current. And when I use the tax year, so it's always a year behind. And then I kind of gave you a 5-year look back on revenues versus expenditures for the police department. And then, based on those trends, I calculated what it might look like in 28. Please keep in mind, these are really rough. And then, so if you want to digest this for a discussion at a later time, but I caution you that we can't kick the can down the road too far. We are going to have a series of meetings to adopt. At least 2 meetings. So.
You have to do public hearings for those too.
And we will sit down, of course, with the police chief and discuss the needs and all that. Is that an executive thing or regular meeting when we
I don't know.
sit down to start hashing out those numbers?
It's a budgetary, so I don't know if budgetary is not, so.
No, I
It'll
think,
be open, but no public participation while we talk
Correct.
about it.
right. But I think if some of that conversation has to get into like talking about specific personnel and things like that, then you would do executive session as courtesy.
So,
This is in depth, so thank you.
you're very welcome.
Do we want to set that date this evening when we sit down with the police chief and start the ball rolling with this?
Do you want this to be an April work session?
If it's going to take 2, that would put us into May on our second work session with that levy and final decision for
And then
the August deadline.
just to remind you of the resolution process, you would do a resolution presenting the information. It then has to go to the auditor's office, and then they have 10 days to get back to you with the certification, and then you actually adopt it at the second. So it takes 2 sets of resolutions, and since we are, only doing first meetings, you might need the June and July meeting in order for everything to be done so that it can be filed with the Board of Elections by August. So, and keep in mind that the prosecutor's office likes to be given a heads up, and she likes to look at the language that we're using prior to. And we're going to be getting into levy season, so we will not be the only person, the only entity asking for their counsel. So it is a process.
When does the spring newsletter go out?
I don't have,
It's kind of fluid, right?
yes.
So if,
Last year it wasn't, we got it out for that meeting that was at the school about the birds farm,
Right.
so.
because I'm thinking if I was someone who wanted to serve on the fiscal oversight committee, right, I would want this balance of, I want to come in and I want to listen to what's being said. I want to know, does this feel like a good fit for me? But I don't want it to be so far down the road that my involvement isn't useful. So I'm thinking if we could maybe get the newsletter out. And maybe this is a special meeting, at that point, just timing wise, but get the newsletter out and give people some time to join us for a couple conversations and then launch a committee in the middle of that. And, kind of, I don't know if that works timing wise, like maybe that's a calendar thing we've got to work out, but I'm not opposed in the spirit of educating and including that we have a couple special meetings if our schedules can align. And if chief's schedule aligns and all that. So. But I know I would need, I am not in charge of numbers for a reason anywhere. So I need,
Time to
I
digest
need a
and
minute to understand what I'm looking at.
And I can certainly walk you through all of that. The other thing to keep in mind is that when the last levy ran in 2016, it was a renewal or replacement with an increase with the understanding that we would be going to a full-time department. Unfortunately, the first year that levy was live and active, it was underperforming in year one. So we want a full-time department, but we didn't ask. And I'm not saying that there's a lot that it's not a lot of millage out there between where we are and where we need to be. But there's just questions. I mean, we've gone to multiple coverage so that we have more than one police officer at any given time during peak hours. And how is that working? And how do the residents feel about it? And, do they want to see that expanded? Are they happy with the coverage that they have? There's just a lot of questions. Yeah. So we just have to kind of know where we're going. If you want to take a minute to walk through this, I can. If you want to make that our April work session, we could do that too. Or if you just want to call me and I could talk to you individually, that's fine as well. Because I know I've thrown a lot of information and it's small print.
Didn't bring my glasses.
I know.
I'm okay if you want to walk through it or if you guys want to digest it. What's your preference?
Yeah, go ahead and just walk through it if you don't mind.
Quick walkthrough. Okay.
Which one was
Starting on the page with the yellow boxes, the first box is just if a renewal of a levy is over time, that 3.75 mil levy on the residential end has reduced itself down now with growth to 3.37 mils on the res ag side. On the commercial industrial side, that 3.75 is down to 3.32. And on the public utility personal property, it's always at the gross, so it's at 3.75. So that can show you. So when you renew, you're renewing it as is. And basically, when you renew, I did some rough numbers. It would generate $815,000 annually, where we're currently generating about $801,000. So it's a small bump for us if we just renew it. The nice thing about renewals, it's no new taxes. Residents on a $100,000 home pay about $105 annually on that 3.75 mil levy, and we would expect it to stay there in that range.
Can I take a?
Sure.
So this is because there's two kinds of levies, right?
Correct.
And our levies are the ones that, hey, we want
Fixed mill.
3.75 and it needs to generate this much money.
Correct.
And your millage drops as your values increase.
Right.
Okay.
So with a fixed millage levy, which is what police and fire levies are, whatever the current valuation that the auditor has, and this is the latest and greatest valuation from the auditor's office, 3.75 mils at the current reduced rate would generate $815,000, no more. As values grow with reappraisals and people add additions to their house and remodel and valuations rise, the rate falls to offset so that it's not generating more than the $815,000 annually. So that's what a renewal gets you. If we just renew it, no new taxes. The existing rollbacks for folks stay in place, meaning what used to be known as the 10% rollback, which is now known as the owner occupancy, and then the non-business credit, which used to be up to 2.5%. So And I have those labels flipped on there. I needed to, they say it, but that's not important. So that's what a renewal gets you, no new taxes. Expenditures, that doesn't come close at this point. If we replace it, meaning we take it back up to the full 3.75, it would generate 902,000 annually. This is a small increase on a $100,000 home of about $25 a year. So it's not a huge ask. I also included for you a median home price average of 215,000. That's what the second column is. But you can't say it's no new taxes. It's mostly no new taxes, but there is a modest increase. And so that's what a replacement does. And then after that, we have the option of doing a renewal with an increase, a replacement with an increase, or we can run two levies, a renewal or a replacement and an additional. I mean, there's a lot of options, but I wanted to show you what 1 mil would generate on the current valuation. 1 mil brings in an additional 240,000. And that costs the taxpayer $35 annually. So we're not talking huge sums of money. And then I did a scenario with 1.5 mils just to give you an idea of what the differences look like. And then at the bottom, I kind of recapped what the revenues would be with the renewal plus 1 mil, what a replacement with 1 mil, 1.5 mils, and then what it would cost our residents. So just so you know, just so you have an understanding of what we're doing and where we are. And so that's the first sheet. The second sheet is just more information for you to understand how our values have increased from 19 tax year to 22, which is the current tax year for the auditor's office. So we have had fairly steady growth just on revals and the little bit of new builds that we get. I will tell you that people see new subdivisions going up and they think, oh, the township's going to get so much more money. No, the rate just comes down. You do get a bump on new construction annually, but it's very small. It's like getting a bonus and then it goes away. And then the next box is, and you might have recognized this from the departmental spreadsheet. This just gives you what our revenues and expenditures have been. And while you can see the jump in revenue from 18 to 19, that's where the new levy came in 19, that 800,000. There is also included in that revenue number are outside contracts with other agencies, grants, and the SRO salary that we get reimbursed from the schools. So you have to think there are about 800,000 of that is like the base. And then anything else we get has been from grants and other outside sources, but it's pretty minimal at best. And then I basically took the trend on how has our revenue increased from 18 to 22, and then applied in the revenue side, we've seen an increase of 36%. And how have our expenditures increased from 18 to 22, and it's been 56%. It's a slightly, that number is a little unfair because from 18 to 19, we went from a part-time department to a semi-full-time department, and we have gradually increased the full-time employees each year. So that's been a gradual progression to full-time, but the 22 numbers give you a better idea of what our actual operation costs are as compared to our revenue. And then I also did how our expenditures trended over the last 5 years. The increase was 56%. So I applied that logic to what could we look like in 28. and did a 5-year head, and that would be the next time we would potentially have to run a renewal or a replacement levy.
And the move from part-time to full-time was voter driven.
Correct.
I mean, the voters
That was-
asked for that to happen.
Correct, and that was part of the levy increase the last time was, hey, we want a full-time a department. That's my understanding. That's what I was, I've gleaned over the years. So that's kind of the information I've provided you just to start the ball rolling, start the conversation, and put the timeline out there. We'll need we'll need 2 meetings, and the auditor has to be able to respond. With us meeting once, with the business meeting being the first Thursday of every month, that auditor should have plenty of time to get us the levy certificate.
I'd like you to explain all those questions too. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Oh, no problem.
Oh. So any questions?
So,
No questions.
and again, if this has been a lot and as you're looking at it later, feel free to call me. I can walk you through it and explain. And if you would like, the auditor will also give you, if you ask them for levy renewal replacement, what will 1 mil do? They will give you estimates. And if you'd like to do that, I can do that just to make sure that my skills I'm not out of shape on that.
I checked. So would it make sense to maybe talk to Lori and Julie and get a calendar of like ideal timing and how the newsletter could fit in and have that come out to everybody and see how that makes sense? And I think Trustee Lauer was right, Chief should be here for some of those discussions, or if not all, and getting a committee on board and letting people know what conversations are. Okay. Yep.
Is it good to have that for the first meeting in April? Is that a rough timeline? And
Have the calendar for the first meeting in April, and then does that
That's fine.
make sense? Like
Yes.
for administrator reports on that one?
super.
Okay, we will table for our next work session, Ross Hamilton Jed, first and next steps. Township-owned Morgan Lane parcel, building use policy, administrative building, and police building roof. That will be talked about at our next work session at the end of April. And now we will move on to 2 motions. So we got 2 motions? Yes, 2 motions this evening. Move for the adoption of motion 23-052 to approve Jason Agaston, got that? To part-time firefighter EMT at a rate of $17.50 per hour. This action is in compliance with the current staffing level and pay summary resolution. I need a second.
A second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Trustee Fisher?
Yes.
Trustee Patterson?
Yes.
Trustee Blower?
Yes. The 2023 appropriations budget was the sole topic of conversation at the special meeting of the board on November 21st, 2022 and December 5th, 2022. The following resolution approves and establishes projected income and expense levels under the 2023 appropriations budget. Move for the adoption of resolution number 2023-019, making permanent appropriations of funds for expenditures during the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2023. I need a second.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Trustee Fisher?
Yes.
Trustee Patterson?
Yes.
Trustee Blower?
Yes. Closing action. Is there any further discussion to come before the board? Move for the adoption of motion 23-053 to adjourn the meeting. I need a second.
Second.
Roll call.
Trustee Fisher?
Yes.
Trustee Patterson?
Yes.
Trustee Blower?
Yes. Our next meeting will be April 6th, 2023 at 6 PM at the Government Center. Thank you for attending.
Good work.